I'm Rosalie Schaefer, and today I'd like to welcome you to our talk on voter rights and voting opportunities. And before we get started, I want to recognize some public officials who have come out today. Karen Carpenter, the school board, and a large contingent from the Manatee County Commission. Michael Gowan, Robin DeSabatino, Carol Whitmore. Did I miss anybody? Okay. Thank you all for taking time in your very busy schedule to come to our talk. We're going to talk about a subject very near and dear to the heart of the League of Women Voters, which is voting rights. The right to vote is our most precious right. We fought for it during the Revolution, and blacks and women had to continue to fight for it over the years. And many say that we are still fighting for it. While there have been many improvements in voting systems in recent years, there have also been some setbacks. And some people say that these new laws and rules have interfered with their right to vote. And on the other side, they claim they are just trying to prevent voter fraud. So we have with us today, we're very pleased to have Carolyn Gray. And she's with the League of Women Voters. And she started the Sanibel Island League of Women Voters. She has come all this way today to speak to our group. And she grew up in Arkansas. She holds a BA, an MA, and a PhD. She moved to Florida from Massachusetts in 1994 to help with the establishment of Florida Gulf Coast University in Fort Myers. She was the founding dean of library services, then served 4 years as dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. She retired from the university in 2010 and is currently an emeritus faculty member. And we also have with us today our current supervisor of elections, Mike Bennett. Where'd he go? There he is. Mike is best known for his service as a legislator in Florida, 2 years in the House and then in the state Senate for 10 years. He was born in Minnesota, moved to Florida in 1955. He holds a BA and an MBA, and he also served in the U.S. Navy during the Vietnam War. So we're very pleased to have our speakers with us today to talk about voting, its importance, and what is being done to discourage voting and what is being done to encourage more voting and turnout. After their presentations, we will have questions from the audience. And we ask you to use the microphone over there to ask your questions and state your name. Okay, without further ado, we will begin. If Carolyn Gray is ready.
I'm ready. First of all, I want to say that when we talk about modernization and reform of our election system, we're not talking just about what has happened in Florida. The President's Commission on Election Reform just submitted a report to the President in January about what needs to be done nationwide. And I'm just going to go over that so that you realize that what's happening in Florida is not a total outlier. They recommend in voter registration that we move toward online registration and interstate of voter lists so that we don't have duplications, and that would be very helpful, I know, for all of us. The second thing is access to the polls. Expansion of the early voting before the actual election day, and using public places such as schools as polling places, and improving our polling place management, and adoption a resource allocation model so that we have resources that are allocated in a systematic way, and improving voter technology. According to the President's Commission, the technology that we're currently using, most places in the U.S., is about to expire in terms of its relevance. And we need to start moving to a better system of voting. And since that's managed by the states, it's going to be managed differently in different places. But we do need to address that from a national perspective, which would make it helpful in terms of the of volume. If you can have enough volume for companies to produce the machines, and they're relatively similar across the states, that would be an improvement. But what about Florida? What the League of Women Voters has tried to do is to develop a roadmap for election reform. And what I'm going to talk about, and what the League has proposed, are what citizens can do. And we all know what went wrong in 2012. There was tailgating and vote gating and waiting in line. On Sanibel, which is a fairly small population, we had people who were standing in line at 7 o'clock who did not vote until 11:30. Now, much like much of this audience, we're not talking about young people who are just getting off work. We're talking about people who had to stand in line, older people. I had a friend who is a practitioner on the island, and she had she was in line. She stood in line for 2 hours, and she's a psychologist, and she had an appointment, so she had to leave. She came back at 6:30, stood in line, and was voting at 11:30. So, you know, this is just not something that should be happening in today's environment. Now, I know that things fail, electronics fail, and some people who are using electronics fail, but this was a more systemic failure throughout the state. And there were seniors and disabled people who left the lines, who didn't vote because of those. And it was the longest ballot in Florida history. And there was a new protocol requiring voters who had moved to cast provisional ballots. All of this led to a massive delay in counting ballots. We were unable to declare a presidential winner until 4 days after election. One person in Palm Beach County said, "I spent one of the worst days of my 58-year-old life on Saturday when I went out to vote early. I endured 8 hours of standing in line in the sun. There is something very stupid about the system of voting here in Florida." State Representative Darrell Rawson says, "Florida was the laughingstock of the nation again this year when it came to voting." The Leon County supervisor said, "It's like pouring sand into the gears of the machine." In Wakulla County, standing in line at a Shell Point retirement community, told it will be 2.5 hours. Several people left saying they just were too old and couldn't wait. This is disgraceful. And why did this happen? Many of the election problems can be traced back to the passage of HB 1355 in 2011, which reduced the number of early voting days from 14 to 8, allowed supervisors of elections to schedule as few as 48 hours of early voting, but no more than 96, eliminated the long-standing provision that allowed voters to update their address at the polls, and called for a host of other requirements which severely restricted access to the ballot. And so how can we ensure this doesn't happen again? Well, the League of Women Voters of Florida has a 7-step roadmap for election reform. For general elections and their primaries, we want to provide a minimum of 9 days of early voting with an option to extend to 14 days. The early voting period should include at least 2 weekends with extended access of 12 hours or more. HB 7013 allows local supervisors to establish longer early voting schedules up to 14 days. Number 2 allows supervisors of elections the ability to select early voting sites in each county consistent with the procedure used to select Election Day polling sites. Currently, only government buildings and libraries are allowed to be used as early voting sites. In 2012, Manatee County, with a population of over 300,000 people, had only 1 early voting location, whereas Leon County, with a similar number of voters, had 5. HB 7013 does allow more sites to be used for early voting, although not as many as promised on Election Day, as provided on Election Day. We need to restore the prior protocol that allowed voters to update their address at the polls on Election Day and still cast a regular ballot. Florida does have a permanent voter registration system, but it was severely hindered by the passage of HB 1355, which eliminated the provision that allowed voters to update their address at the polls. HB 7013 reinstates this protocol for voters who live in counties with electronic poll books. Number 4, we need to develop an online voter registration system to supplement the current paper-based system. Online voter registration currently is used in 15 states and can reduce cost and the errors that occur from misinterpreting handwritten forms. This is a cartoon that I wish you could see, but it says, "Technology allows me to talk, email, shop, bank, and remotely start my car while standing 7 hours in a line to vote. We have the technology to do this. There's no reason why this can't be done. HB 7013 does not address online voter registration, so that's still not in the legislation. Number 5, we need to create a uniform and timely process for notifying voters if their vote by mail, also known as absentee ballot, has been accepted or rejected, and allow voters whose vote by mail ballot has been rejected a remedy for ensuring they are not unduly disenfranchised. Currently, voters are not informed until after the election. Mistakes and issues with absentee ballots should not prevent voters from participating in the democratic process. Again, HB 7013 does allow voters who forget to sign their absentee ballot to submit an affidavit in order to have their ballot counted. And number 6, address mobility issues and safety concerns for voters who are disabled or elderly, and provide an expedited process to allow them to vote without having to stand in line. Previous elections have left countless seniors and disabled voters unable to cast a ballot due to inaccessibility. HB 7013 does not address disability access at the polls. Number 7, in response to the 2012 ballot, which was loaded with lengthy, complex summaries of 11 constitutional amendments, we should require legislative proposed constitutional amendments be held to the same standard for clarity and concision as citizens' initiatives, including limiting ballot summaries to 75 words or less. HB 7013 does limit legislators' first version of a ballot summary to 75 or less. Subsequent versions can be longer. It's not done yet. So, we have a character sitting here at the ballots and has a sign up, $1 each, Florida ballot questions translated into plain English. We can try to do that as the League of Women Voters, but that's not the way to run an election. I was so impressed with the election that has just been held in Afghanistan, because we haven't been shot at the polls. We haven't been restricted in the way they have. And it's encouraging to see that a country who has suffered so much in recent years was willing to stand up to the Taliban. I think that it's much easier to stand up to our legislature and to insist that we have clean and readable ballots and reasonable approaches to election reform. And I think we have to speak up. And the legislature is still in session, and I hope that some of you will be joining us in Tallahassee for the LWV Legislative Assembly, and we can make a difference in terms of having our voice heard. So currently our status is the League has sent a letter to Secretary of State Dentzer outlining these suggestions. And Governor Rick Scott reiterated some of the League's recommendations, declaring that Florida will do whatever possible to improve our election system from the statewide level. And the league's recommendations were also sent to the chairs of the Ethics and Elections Commission in the Florida House and Senate, as well as the Speaker of the House and the President. One bill that I kept mentioning, HB 7013, increasing the number of early voting locations, the number of allowable days for early voting, and placing some limits on the length of constitutional amendment summaries, passed both the Florida House of Representatives and the Florida Senate the last day of the 2013 legislative season. The League believes that this is an excellent bill that will go a long way to address some of Florida's largest election problems. And the bill has been signed into law by Governor Rick Scott, and it will go into effect, or has gone into effect, January 1st, 2014. And that, I'm getting the time signal. Do we have any time for questions, or do we do that later? Okay, thank you very much.
Appreciate everybody taking the time to come out and talk to us today, and let us try to bring you up what's going on in Manatee County. You know, it's interesting. I think most people in here are familiar with the Pew Foundation. If you would ask the Pew Foundation, where do you think Florida ranks in efficiency and honesty and correctness of voting when it's compared to the other 49 states, where do you think that report would show Florida? 50? That's interesting. Actually, no, it's in the top half of it. So yes, we have issues, but so does other places. Yes, Florida is rated in the top half. It's not as bad as the newspapers and the press make it out to be. And do we have issues? Certainly we do. You know, Manatee County last year, or the last major election, did have some lines at their early voting site. But I talked to Bob Sweat, I talked to staff, I talked to several people who stood in those lines, and a lot of them stood in those lines, believe it or not, by choice. Bob went out and talked to them, said, look, there's not going to be in line at your precinct. Why? We're already here, we're talking to our friends and neighbors, and we don't mind waiting. We've come down from church and don't have anything else. Now, were there other people over in West Palm and other places that had lines? You better believe it, okay? And they should have done some actions to correct those lines. The problem that they had in Manatee County last year was the fact that, I think, of only one early voting site. And so when I got elected, that was one of the things that a lot of people said, you know, we have to have more early voting sites. Does anybody have any idea how many early voting sites, for example, New York City has? Anybody know? It's called 0, okay? 0. And guess what? They get their voting done, okay? We've also went back and I have started looking at some of the statistics from the turnout at voting prior to easing up the regulations of getting an absentee ballot. And you would have thought, now that we made absentee ballots a lot easier, we would have got a big increase in the turnout. Simply didn't happen. So we decided, well, let's add early voting. Maybe we'll get a better turnout. Guess what? We didn't get it happen either. Okay? So even though we have made it more convenient, the turnout has not necessarily been what we're looking for. But what has worked, believe it or not, is absentee voting by mail. Okay? We know that there's a higher propensity to vote if people have the ballot sitting at home, they're sitting down, they're looking at it, they're discussing it with their spouse, they're discussing it with their friends, they're discussing it with their associates, they will fill out that ballot. It's substantially higher. I think last year I was speaking to Pat Mason with the Democrat Party, and something like 89% of the people who requested the absentee ballot actually voted for it. Okay? So it's substantially higher. And so we're really trying to encourage in Manatee County more vote by mail. One of the things that we are doing is we're increasing the number of early voting sites. We will go from 1 to 4. We will have an early voting site in Lakewood Ranch. We will have it at Rocky Bluff Library. We will have it at the Manatee Convention Center, and we will continue to use our office. I'd like to have a 5th one. The problem with it is trying to find a location. You know, it's real easy to stand up here and say, well, we need more early voting sites. The problem with it is it's extremely difficult to find, and here's why. I'm going to go into a man's place of business or even a government building and say, look, I need you to give me 3,000 square feet of space and give it to me for 8 days. How many businesses do you know that have an additional 3,000 square feet of space that they are not using? Okay? The space is at a premium, so it's difficult. People say, well, why don't you use schools? Well, does anybody in here remember the Jessica Lunsford Act? The Jessica Lunsford Act said in order for us to go into a school building, we had to have a security clearance. If you go to a school building now to try to pick up your children or something along that line, you're going to have to sign in, you're going to have a security, they're going to want to know who you are. Can you imagine people standing in line to try to go out and vote at that school as the school monitor is signing each one in and each one out, okay? So yes, schools are an option. Unfortunately, they're not sufficient. Then we have places that we would like to use for precincts. Unfortunately, they don't have a proper parking area, or the parking area is way too far from the voting. So it's a little bit more difficult than you think. One of the things that we are going to do, we are looking for a 5th voting site out west because we don't have anything out there. We'd like to have something. You know, you even take some of the simple things of finding a precinct. For example, out on the island, I know Commissioner Whitmore is here, and she will tell you how difficult it is to try to find a building out on the island that you can capture for 8 days. It's difficult to find one for 1 day. I mean, we really do have a problem. The one place, I think, down at Braden Beach had a grand total of 4 parking spaces. That was the only one we could find, okay, that would give us the space. And so it's not quite as easy, but if you know of a spot that would help us in West Manatee, I would certainly appreciate it. Something else that we're looking at, and there's kind of a discussion between several supervisors of elections and the state of Florida, we believe that remote drop-off for absentee ballot, we can do that. And what we would like to do is we would hope that you would encourage your friends and associates and everybody else you know to request an absentee ballot. We'll mail the ballot out. Prior to the election day, you cannot bring in the absentee ballot and drop it off. It has to be prior to that. But we would have some remote drop-off spots, and so I'm looking to possibly find a remote drop-off spot or 2 out in West Manatee, which might alleviate that area. Some of the people down in Commissioner Gallen's district are concerned about their drop-off, and so we're trying to find a couple of drop-off spots, and we will probably go ahead and do that down in those districts. And so we're looking for those spots. The biggest issue you're going to find, again, is trying to get people to request an absentee ballot. We have, in fact, it's at the back, if you've got somebody who does not vote absentee, there's a lot of debate. I believe that you get a better educated voter with an absentee ballot. My wife and I are sitting down in the morning, we're having breakfast together, we're discussing the ballot, we're looking at the ballot, we're asking, well, who is this guy that's running for this, or what is this issue that's on the ballot? What does that constitutional amendment really mean? I think when I can come to, say, the League of Women Voters and go to a meeting with my friends and peers and say, you know, I got my ballot in the mail, and, you know, I really don't know anything about this constitutional amendment. Let's talk about it, okay? You've got a little bit of time to educate yourself. The question is getting it back to us, okay? And I want to make sure that we've got every ability to get that back here, that we can do it. As you all know, I did cut down on the number of precincts. I had a budget situation. The commissioners in the room would tell you money is not free-flowing in Manatee County any more than it is anywhere else. We had a vote last year to try to raise a 0.5-cent sales tax to try to pay for health care, and we couldn't get it passed. So I said, how can I get the absentee or the early voting sites that I need that would help the people of Manatee County overcome that problem and stay within the budget? So we started calculating, what does it cost us to set up an early voting site? It costs us about, $25,000 to $50,000 the first time out. We'll save a little bit of money in the future because we have to buy the equipment the first time, the ballot on demand equipment. But we won't have that investment in future times. So we said, okay, if we stay open for 8 days, okay, if you would say each day that we are open is equivalent to a day at a precinct, okay? So if you take 8 days times four early voting sites, that's 32 precincts, or 32 voting days. We decided we could cut down on some of the precincts. So we started looking at each of the precincts, and we looked at every single precinct. I met with the League of Women Voters. I met with the NAACP. I met with the Democrat Party. I met with the Republican Party. We went over every single location to try to look at it. Then I went in, I met with each of the county commissioners, showed them exactly what we were going to do, how it was going to affect them, where it was going to be at in their district, so everybody would know what we were doing. Everybody agreed this was what we were going to do. The day before the election, it was pointed out to Commissioner Gallen there were some issues that we missed, and we absolutely missed them, okay? And I think Susie Copeland, in fact, I think Susie's here, she would tell you that we missed a big one. And we really, truly did. And so Commissioner Gallen called me and said, you know, we got an issue. We came out, we tried to solve that issue. I think that we came up with an alternative, and we did. And so we added that precinct back in. So I think that we're going to be okay. If we were going to make any changes to the precincts, we wanted to do them this year. And the reason it's so important to make those precinct changes this year is if I'm wrong, okay? And I guarantee you I'm going to be wrong on at least one. I just don't know which one it's going to be, okay? We're going to be wrong, okay? We have time prior to the presidential election to fix it. I can handle a problem this time, but I don't want to have a problem during the presidential election. The other thing we're doing is we will be mailing out the new voter registration cards. You should start receiving them possibly at the end of this week. If not, most of you will have them by the end of next week. And in those voter registration cards, it will also have on there a place that you can fill out and request an absentee ballot. You can call my office and get an absentee ballot. You can do it online and get an absentee ballot. We're trying to make it as easy as possible. Then, in order to save money, because it costs us about 50 cents to mail everyone out a card, actually it's going to be a little bit less than that because we're going to do it with a bundled mail. We can get a rate of about 38 cents. But I've met with the Manatee County Utility Department. They're going to include in your bill, if you get it from the Manatee County Utility Department, a request for an absentee ballot. We've met with the City of Bradenton, and the City of Bradenton is going to do in their utility bill a request for absentee ballot. We're meeting with the City of Palmetto. We believe we have an agreement with the City of Palmetto that they will also in their utility bill. When we send out the request, or excuse me, the sample ballot, which you will get somewhere probably the end of July, 1st of August, okay, prior to the primary, it'll again be requesting vote by mail. This is how you do it. It'll also list where the early voting sites are. We will do it again prior to the general election. So we're really going to be pushing this. We know that Pinellas County has approximately 68% of all the voters in Pinellas County vote by mail. We also know that they have the highest voter turnout in the state. That's what we're looking to do. And I know that I've spoke to the Democrat Party, the Republican Party, and I know that last year the Democrat Party, last election, did a wonderful job of calling literally everybody they had a contact with and encourage them to vote by mail. We really need you to do that again. I would hope that the league would push the vote by mail. Anything that we can piggyback on and we can work out together, any kind of mailing, any kind of notification, we'll be looking to do that. I'm hoping to have a media day, and probably we'll do that sometime mid-July. And again, I'm hoping to get all the TV stations and the radio stations and the newspapers and the rest of them to really be pushing the early voting sites and the vote by mail. I think Manatee County, I think we can hit those numbers, okay? But it's going to take a big effort. It took the the Pinellas County Supervisor of Elections, it took her about 7 years to get to these kind of numbers. I think we can do it faster because they didn't use the utility department. They didn't get the cooperation. I think there's an issue there. So I think we're going to get it. We'll keep working on it and try to do better. And so that's where we're at right now. And if we have any lines, and we're going to request that all of our clerks and all of our deputy clerks keep track of. Now, we know we're always going to have a line. And so people say, well, what's a line? I don't know. What is an acceptable line? We know that the line is acceptable at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's not acceptable at 10:30 in the morning. We know that the line is acceptable at 5:30 in the afternoon, where it's not acceptable at 3. Because when people are on their way to work, they know they want to be the first one there. I want to go in and vote, and I don't care what precinct you go to, you're probably going to have a line. Okay? We know at the end of the day, people are coming home from work, they're going to have a line. Okay, so that's basically what we're going to do on it, and we'll have a good one, and we'll monitor everyone, and those that we need changes at. I know that the Republican and the Democrat and the League of Women Voters and everybody else is going to be watching this, and like as I said, I know we've made a mistake. I just don't know where it's at yet. We'll find it. So, and I'll take any questions you got. Rosalie?
We're ready for questions now, and before we get started, I've got one of my own for Mr. Bennett. Just repeating what I've heard from people who have qualms about the absentee ballots. What happens if they forget to put postage on it or forget to sign their ballot?
You know, it's interesting, the postage situation, kind of interesting. Believe it or not, by federal law, the U.S. Post Office has to deliver. Okay, they have to deliver the ballot back to me. Here's the problem, okay, and we're working with them also, believe it or not. And we did not have that problem. When I talked to Bob Sweat about it, they did not have that problem. But some of the precincts across the country, across the state of Florida even, the postmaster wasn't aware of that, okay? And so when they were brought aware of it, they brought the stack of ballots in that they didn't have the postage. Unfortunately, the election had been over for a week, okay? So we are making sure that they understand if there is insufficient postage, it has to be delivered. Now, you always get into debate who's going to pay for it. We'll figure that out later, but we will get those ballots. And then you had another? Okay, one of the things that we did, and I was lucky enough to still be involved with having a little clout in Tallahassee, not much anymore. It goes down every single day, by the way. But we were able to convince them of a couple of things. For early voting sites, I wanted to have the ability to pick what I called a wild card spot. And that was how we ended up with Lakewood Ranch. And we didn't end up with Lakewood Ranch because we were actually found a little niche in that corner too. But a wild card spot, if I can find a building in West Manatee that is not government owned, it doesn't meet the other stuff, and if I can go out and cut a deal on a rental for those 8 days or 10 days or whatever else we're going to stay open, then I can use that wild card spot, even though it does not qualify as a government funded building, okay? The other thing that we asked them to do, and which they did, is give us the ability, believe it or not, by Florida statute, we were not allowed to, if she didn't sign her absentee ballot, we were not allowed to call her, okay? We were not allowed to notify her. Last year in that legislation, we can now notify them, and Rosalie, you forgot to sign your ballot, could you come down and sign it? You got to fill out a little affidavit that you missed it, but we can get that. We could not do that before. So we will have staff on site this year as those ballots come in if we find something that's wrong. And I don't know how many of you work the polls? Anybody work the polls? Congratulations, I wish you all did, okay? I really do, and we're always looking for people. And this is not a volunteer position. Everything's a volunteer position. We pay you, okay? My staff, the number of employees that I have will go from around 15 people to around 1,200 people, okay? And they are paid. And we really would appreciate anybody who has an interest in working for polls to apply. We think with the reduction in the polling this year, we may not have as big of issue as we've had in the past, but sometimes those girls, we have 2 girls in our office that literally spend 90% of their time doing nothing but trying to find poll workers for those polls. But I think we'll be okay on it. But we can notify you, we will work with it. We always try to err on the side of the voter. The last countywide election we had, the canvassing board actually rejected a grand total of 2 ballots. One of them because there was no signature whatsoever, and the other one, there was no way you could read it whatsoever. One of the problems we've got, you know, you talk about the unintended consequences of legislation. One of the things that we did with the motor voter was one of the unintended consequences is motor voter is I moved down here from Michigan, and I go over to the Department of Motor Vehicles and I get my new driver's license for Florida. And you sign for it. What do you sign on? Electronic pad. Does anybody in this room have the same signature on electronic pad as they do on that piece of paper? So the one that we've got to compare it to is the electronic signature. And now I'm trying to say, I think that's her, okay, but I'm not sure, okay? So then we sit down and we start analyzing, and we have a county judge, and we have the commissioner from the Manatee County Commission and myself. We sit down. It takes 2 votes to accept, 2 votes to reject, and we look at every single one. Last year in the total elections, they said there were 2. One of them, there was no signature whatsoever. There's nothing I can do about that, okay? But at that time, we did not have the ability to contact them. Now, and we know who it was, but we didn't have the ability. We did notify them later on. The other mistake that frequently happens is Robin and I are married, and we sit down in the morning and we're discussing the ballot, and we both vote and stick them in the envelope and go up and get another cup of coffee, come back. I sign Robin's and she signs mine. When they come in, they're each is barcoded. And as soon as the lady in the office slides that in, the barcode jumps up and it shows who's supposed to vote on it and whose signature is supposed to be on the back of it. Well, they realize that's not my signature, but you know what? The girls are pretty smart. They also realize Mike Bennett's married. Let's see what happens. They set it aside. About next day comes in, Robin's comes in. They scan it, boom, it doesn't have Robin's signature on it, it's got my signature on it. We count them, okay? We count them. There may be a technicality in the law that you're not supposed to do that. We count them. We will always err on the side of the voter. And any other questions? I'm sorry, Rosalie's giving her fingers. Questions? Yeah.
This is working. Hi, Mike.
Hey, bud.
I commend your work on early expanding that, as you well know. A couple of questions about vote by mail, because I do believe that you're strongly supporting that. One misunderstanding on the part of lots and lots of voters is that when they request, quote, permanent status absentee ballots or vote by mail status, it's really only good for 2 election cycles.
Two major
election cycles.
Right, 5 years, basically.
But again, in the letter that you're sending out to all voters, will you indicate that particular point? Because so many people, quite frankly, I call every major election year because I never remember when was the last time I actually requested to be in that particular vote by mail status. But we talked to many, many people. I would suggest anybody in this room, if you think you're in that status right now, it's probably worth your while to check, because if you requested it first of all in 2010, you're off the list. It was good for 2010, 2012, 2014. You've got to renew it.
And I think we're sending out letters to everyone whose time is up. Okay, but I agree with you. We could put that on there too.
The second one does deal with. I've only got stats for the Democratic Party. We moved from about 4,000 voters in this county to over 17,000 voters who had requested, Democrats who had requested vote by mail by October of 2012. The specific question, the latest figures that I've gotten from your staff is that the number of Democrats who are now in the vote by mail status is down to 6,000, from 17,000 to 6,000. I understand some of that decrease will be because of death, people moving away, possibly changing their political party status, et cetera. There may be some of those individuals, that 11,000 difference, who have fallen past the 2 major election cycle. I did send this information to your staff members. That was back in the 20s, I think 25th of March. I'm still waiting for an answer as to why the huge decrease in Democratic voters who've requested to vote by mail from again, about 17,000 in 2012 to now only 6,000.
You know, it's an interesting question. I really don't know. And since you have my personal email and my personal cell phone, I wish you would have included in me, I guarantee I would have got you an answer. And in fact, I would ask you to resend that to me real quick, and I'll have you an answer before the end of the week. Okay? You might not like the answer, but I'll have you one. So, and if I don't know the answer, I kind of make something up as we go anyhow. So, yes, ma'am.
Hi. I want to also commend you for all your efforts in expanding the availability of the opportunity to vote, because I think we're all committed to that. However, there is a perception out there, in spite of the expansion of the vote by mail, that people might or might not trust the mail. And is it possible that they can drop off the ballots at your main headquarters, when it's closed.
You know, right now, we do not have that. We're in the process of remodeling up there, and we're thinking of putting in a drop box just for that. We've actually spoken to the engineering people down in Manatee County, and we're looking at that, and we probably will do that. One of the things that we did, because you're correct, there are some people, and I understand that, who want to put it in the box. Okay, and I truly, truly understand that. So that's the reason that I'm looking for the remote drop-offs, and we would keep those open till whatever it was, 7 o'clock at night, whatever. But we are looking at a drop box at the office where people could come in. The problem with it is we've got to make sure that it has the same security as anything else. So if I put it at our office, it's kind of difficult because of all the glass out there. Unless I can figure out a way to really, truly mount that box where you could not go. I don't know if anybody knows this. I think last year it was in Oskaloosa County where the guy broke into the building and they grabbed the safe, and inside the safe were all the absentee ballots. And the guy ran off thinking he was going to get all the money. You know, he didn't get any money, okay? But it sure screwed up an election, okay? And we don't want that to happen here, so I want to make sure that that box is well secured, where somebody doesn't think they're going to come in and grab my safe and run. And I think we'll put on there, there's no money in, dummy, okay, or something along that line.
Great,
So
thank
we
you.
will look at it.
Nancy Horn. Senator Bennett, how do you feel about online voter registration?
I don't have any problem with online voter registration. In fact, I kind of like online voter registration. It's just like online right now, you can request an absentee ballot. So if you can do one, I don't understand why you couldn't do the other. One of the things that we're looking at, and going back to what the lady from the League of Women Voters was talking about, is a national registry. We are meeting with the state of Florida right now. The Pew Institute is pushing a program called ERIC. Okay, I can't quite remember what the acronym stands for, but it's a national database, okay? And we feel that when we get that national database, it would make sure that if I relocated here from Minnesota, I wasn't voting in Minnesota and Florida. But in addition to that, we think that when that happens, then we would have a better shot for online registration. The problem that you have with online registration is we would want to do it where you could register online, but the first time you voted, you must show up at a precinct with identification showing that that was a legal person who signed up for that. You know, the state of Washington and the state of Oregon have 100% vote by mail. They do not have the some of the problems that we've had down here with our voting. See, I don't, you know, people talk about the voter purge, okay? You keep hearing about the voter purge. There's no purge, okay? I don't care what the newspaper, press, or anybody else jumps onto. There's not a purge, okay? We get all kinds of lists, and we try to go through those lists and take people off who should not be on there. Last year in Manatee County in 2013, we removed approximately 9,000 people, okay? Well, that sounds like, my God, if that ain't a purge, what is? Well, Susie will tell you, 4,000 of them died, okay? Another 4,000 moved, okay? So you know how many illegals we removed in Manatee County last year? Anybody got an idea? 0, okay? We don't care where we get the list from. I don't care who sends us the list. We don't trust anybody else's list. We would review every single name.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Roy McChesney. At the time you were elected, you said Mr. Sweat did a very good job. You couldn't see how you'd improve upon his performance in his office. And now you've entered a complete turnaround, your own program, and a lot of things to be done that are going to make it more difficult to vote. People are going to have to re-register. Before you were elected, you said that you didn't want everyone to vote because everybody was not intellectually or educationally qualified to vote.
I don't believe that I ever said that.
You made the statement also that you would prefer that it was harder to vote.
I wish that everybody in the world would fight as hard for our vote.
That's what you said.
You know, in the heat of
implied that
debate, sometimes the words don't come out like you want it
I
to.
see. Well,
Okay. No, I don't make excuses. I said exactly that. Okay. But sometimes in the heat of a debate, you know, you speak a little bit quick, it doesn't quite come out the way you thought it was supposed to come out.
The implication suggests that you think that voting is a privilege.
It is. It's a privilege to live in a country that it's a right to vote.
It is a right of citizenship.
Absolutely.
It is a right of citizenship.
Do you have a question?
Not a privilege for the few.
Do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. You closed 33 precincts. You've restored one and thought that was salve on the wounds. A lot of people in those other 32 wish their
Do you have a
precincts were
question?
open again.
Do you have a question?
That was my question. Why? Why?
Why?
All these
Because I
changes,
did the
why?
study and
When
I didn't
you said
think
there was no
Okay,
no need
thank
for it
you.
before.
Thank you. You have a question, sir?
I do. I do. There's an organization, a national organization called ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council. And it seems to be going around the nation providing legislators with legislation to restrict voting, specifically catering, it looks like, to minorities. A couple of years ago, when you were a legislator, you said that you were a member of ALEC. And I'm just curious now, in your new position as Supervisor of Elections, whether or not you still support that organization and are still a member of that organization.
No, I'm
Thank
not.
you. Excuse me?
No, I'm not.
So you don't believe in that organization now, or do you believe in their...
I still believe in the organization. I just don't necessarily, you know, rubber stamp every position they come up with, just like I don't rubber stamp every position that the Republican Party comes up with or the Democrat Party. I think I'm capable of thinking on my own. And some of the things that ALEC did, no, did not go along with what I thought or what I wanted to do. I'm not a member of ALEC. I've actually would hope that one day the state of Florida would make every supervisor of elections in the state of Florida a non-electrical or a non-political position. So far they've not done that. I don't think a lot of my Republican friends believe in that. Okay, that's how I believe.
Thank you. Good answer.
Francis McGuire. Is the closing of the polling stations temporary or permanent?
I think that you'd have to say that it's always temporary, and here's why. As the population shifts and it moves around, you know, you talk about some of the issues that you have. I don't know. Tom, do you represent Parrish area? Is that your area, or is that Bustle's area? You know, you look at some of the driving distances they have up there. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, some of them got 15, 20 miles that they got to go. Well, there's no population up there. We will be adding precincts as that population continues to grow. And so it's always flexible, and I think it should be flexible. And so there's nothing permanent about it. We will adjust that as we go. As they get more building up there and more homes in the Parrish, Ellington area, I'm sure we'll be adding precincts up there. I would expect that pretty much Lakewood Ranch will continue to grow. They will need precincts out there. There's not much more you can do with the island. The population is so tough. Probably the biggest change you'll have out there is trying to find locations, but that's where it's at.
Well, beyond that, by closing the polling stations, is there any concern or safeguards that perhaps the franchise might be suppressed?
Oh, absolutely. I'm always concerned about that, and I think you should be concerned about it. But on the same token, I've got the ability to change it. If I'm wrong, then we will change it. I'm sure that the League and the NAACP and the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, I can guarantee you if there's a problem in some area, I will hear about it, and we will fix it.
Thank you.
Susie Copeland, NAACP. As supervisor of election in the state of Florida, a lot of our ex-felons, their rights were not restored. What position do you take on that? Do you think it ought to be an automatic restoration once they have completed their sentencing and any fines paid?
So I think if you actually go back and look at legislation, I actually tried to do legislation to do just that. We couldn't get it out of a committee hearing at the time, but I guess that you might say since I was a pretty wild kid when I grew up, okay? I think that people make mistakes, they make changes. If they have done their, quote, time, if they have served paid their restitution or whatever the particular thing is, I don't understand why it's not automatic. I don't like how it's done in the state of Florida. I don't like our idea of clemency board, the way that they're doing it. We tried to change it. I lost. Something I would continue to fight for.
Good afternoon. This question arises from the first gentleman that was up, where his numbers dropped from 17,000 to 6,000.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any evidence of fraud in this Manatee County, voter fraud?
You know, it's interesting. We could not find, in the time that I've been there, okay, I do not believe. In Manatee County, we had one individual who we happen to know voted illegally, okay? And the only reason that one jumped up is because she had done it before, okay? And so she wants to vote, okay? Unfortunately, she's not registered, she's not qualified. You know, we don't have many people on the ballot, on the voting rolls up there, very few people on the voting rolls who truly, we don't have voter fraud, but we do have a lot of people who probably shouldn't be on the voter rolls, okay? And so we work at removing those. We did remove about 350 felons last year and a couple of other people, but a lot of these people never intended to vote, okay? But what happened is we all go to church together, and we've got an issue. We want to raise the half-cent sales tax for schools like they just did down in Sarasota. And you all are passionate about it, and I'm a brand new guy in the community. And you're really I'm trying to get involved in our church group here, and you're saying, you know, our church is really behind us. Mike, are you registered to vote? And I said, well, no, I'm not, okay? And you say, you know, you got to register because we really got to get this. And I register to vote knowing I'm never going to vote, but I don't want to tell my new church group that I'm a convicted felon from Minnesota, okay? So I sign up under social pressure, never having the intention to vote. Last year, we found, as I said, one lady. She had done it twice. That's the only one we know of that somebody actually committed, quote, fraud, and I don't consider that fraud. I think she was whacked out. But.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Johnny Nielsen. I had a couple of quick questions, and one is what you just talked about, duress, people voting under duress. Wouldn't the absentee ballot, wouldn't that be implied?
You know, I think that if we're going to have a problem with voter fraud, it could be absentee ballots.
But that's
okay?
what you're encouraging.
Well, it could. We are encouraging it. But on the same token, what I'm hoping to do is that the huge increase of voter turnout might offset those one or two where, by God, you're my kid and this is how we're going to vote, and sit down here and fill this out. I'm going to tell you how to fill it out. Is that going to happen? Absolutely, it's going to happen. But there's nothing I can do about that. But yes, it could happen. But isn't the same token, the same kind of pressure sometimes happen when people go to the polls and vote? It could.
Oh, well, those are secret ballots, not absentee ballots. There is a big difference. My other question is, what was the main criteria for getting rid of the precincts? What was the main criteria?
The main criteria we looked at is, the first thing we looked at was voter turnout. Okay, but before we even got to that, as we were looking through them, we found that we had 5 or 6 precincts that did not even meet ADA requirement. Okay, there was no paved parking, there were stairs to go up, there was not a way for handicapped people to get in and out. Well, those were the easy ones pretty much to eliminate. And most of those we were able to transfer to another location. Then we started looking at the number of people in each precinct, and we started calculating what is the turnout at those precincts, what has it been? What has been the increase in the vote by mail? What has been the increase in the early voting? So the number of people who actually showed up at the polls. I think Commissioner DeSabatini will tell you in her last election, at one of her polls, I think it was one of your polls, wasn't it, Robin? They had one voter, okay? Now, does anybody in this room really think that I got to keep that precinct open and staff it with 3 people, okay, and the equipment and everything else to keep it open? Wouldn't it be easier to, let's see if we can't combine those 2 precincts together and have some efficiency?
How many registered voters are in Manatee County?
About 208,000.
So it's going to be, you're spending 38 cents per new registration card to send out to all these voters.
By law, you have to send out new registration cards anytime you change the precinct, okay? And we're also required to change them, you know, on a periodic basis anyhow.
So how much is that costing?
It's going to cost about $80,000.
$80,000 to send out new registration cards because you're closing the precincts. And how much did the precincts run altogether? How much did it cost to run all those 32 precincts?
Our budget is around $1 million.
So you're spending $80,000 to save $1 million.
No, I'm spending $80,000 to make sure that everybody in Manatee County knows where they're going to go on voting day, and that we can encourage the amount of voting that we've got.
Let's have a big hand for our excellent speakers today. Well, I think we all learned a great deal today, and there's a lot more work needs to be done to improve voter turnout in Manatee County. More people need to get registered, and the people who are registered need to get out there and vote. It's not good when a good turnout is considered to be 65%. We need to make improvements in vote by mail, early voting. These are all going to help. But mainly, people need to become more motivated to vote. Okay, thank you for coming today. And I want to thank METV for taping our program for later viewing, and also on their website at metvweb.com. And I want to thank the Bradenton Women's Club for the use of their facility. So I hope you all can also come to our event on Saturday. We're going to have Dr. Susan McManus talk about politics and election 2014. And we've got forms that you will really need to fill out and get your money in fast, because it's coming up Saturday, and they need to know by Thursday what our entrees are going to be. So thank you again for coming, and we'll see you soon. And check for our website, lwvmanatee.org. And we're going to have lots of voting information. We're going to have voters' guides to candidates and to the amendments, and you know, who to contact for what. So just check in on it. We'll be putting together our guides after qualification in June. And we're also going to be conducting debates with METV and the Bradenton Herald. So watch for those too. There's plenty of information out there. It's just a matter of, you know, accessing it. Thank you again.